So welcome back, or welcome to Tara Institute. My name's Damien. Thanks for coming out on a public holiday and a cold one as well. So I'll continue on with the topic for this month, and the topic for this month is basically sort of looking at the human condition, more than anything, looking at the human condition and then seeing what can we do as humans. So, as I said last week, we have this sense of I. Now we have a sense of I, and then we have a sense of I, and then we have a body, and we have a mind. And to some degree, as far as my experience goes, and as far as everything in my life goes, in one sense, that's it. So we might think of the I or me as something a lot more extensive than that. But I think it's beneficial to just think there's I, this sense of I. And probably good to put some time into trying to put your finger on that sense of I. And then there's my body and my mind. And last week we discussed how we can say that there is a happiness of the body and a happiness of the mind, and there is a suffering of the body and a suffering of the mind. And so if my body and my mind are suffering, then I am suffering. If my body and my mind are happy, I am happy. So it sounds really simplistic, but these are things worthy of convincing yourself that this is, my existence. And furthermore, if my body is suffering, but my mind is happy, then I am happy. So this shows that the mind actually has a more important role in determining our happiness. And similarly, if my body is in perfect health, no illness, no complications, but my mind is unhappy, then I am unhappy. So very important to think about this. So it gives us a little bit of a basis to understand why thought transformation or working on our attitudes and working on our behaviours is actually more important in many ways than our diet or our physicality. So good to understand that in this, if there's a hierarchy, that the happiness of my mind is the most important thing. So there is, I, my body, my mind. And also the point that I was talking about last week, and which is very common, especially, from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, will regularly start off his talks saying, everybody wants happiness and wants to be free from suffering. And so that wish for happiness and the wish to be free from suffering is a commonality. It's a shared common interest that we have with every living being. And so the more we can contemplate that every living being is common in that regard with us, we share that same wish for happiness and the wish to be free from suffering. And the important point about that is that if we really develop that recognition, it can actually become a basis on which or how we interact with others. It becomes a focal basis for the way that we interact with others, the way that our behaviour is towards others. And also, from my point of view, that wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering actually describes why everybody behaves in the way that they do. So even when we might judge their behaviour to be harmful or their behaviour to be self-destructive, their actions are in nobody's good interests, still I would always assert that they are acting from the wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. So this is the great human sort of complexity, that everybody has this wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. So what is it that goes wrong? You know, like as we discussed last week, why do people then engage in actions that harm themselves and harm others, and make decisions which are unskillful, make the decisions that are unproductive and cause conflict and cause separation? So what happens to us is that, you know, so from this sense of I, the different experiences that I have, I like this, I don't like that. So there's this natural inclination for us to separate things into what I like and what I dislike. And we create reasons why those judgments are valid. And then on the basis of, let's say, on the basis of the judgment that I like something, I start to think that, you know, we have this natural inclination, I want happiness, and then we make some leap of faith that we think, if I possess this thing that I like, I will have happiness. And not only that, we can sort of exaggerate it to the point that we think, if I possess this thing that I like, not only will I have happiness, but I will have ultimate happiness. I will have the complete fulfillment of my whole being. So this is an exaggeration on the qualities of the object that I like. So I have the thought that I like seems innocent, but the exaggeration of that thought creates this scenario where I start to think, if I possess or control this object, that my total happiness will be fulfilled. So this is the mind of desire and attachment, which creates an exaggeration of a circumstance to the point where we think that my possession or my holding, my encompassing of that thing will be my total source of happiness. And similarly, something that I dislike, I start to think that if I am separated from this thing that I dislike, if I am able to push away, to shun, to humiliate, to cut off, to subdue, to depress this circumstance or this person, then I will be free of suffering. So the mind of anger and hatred stems from that construction or that belief that by destroying this thing that I dislike, I will be free of problems. So in both cases, there's an exaggeration that occurs. Now, unfortunately for us, we have become so habituated to this thinking that any circumstance that we encounter without thinking, without even thinking and without even recognizing what's actually going on, we instinctively grab some emotion from our habituated toolkit. So it's like we carry with us a toolkit of responses to situations. And the unfortunate thing is that toolkit of responses that we have collected has become polluted by anger and jealousy and pride and arrogance and miserliness and, separation, superiority. So one way to look at this whole idea is that on the basis of I, sense of I, and like and dislike, to deal with life, I have developed a toolkit of responses to life. But the unfortunate thing is that we have habituated ourselves to tools which are, by their very nature, destructive of our happiness, and they are conducive to our suffering. And you think, why is this? So the Buddhist approach to this is saying that, well, the problem is that we are looking at everything in the wrong way, that there is a deep-seated underlying ignorance that unfortunately has polluted our view of the world. And so we are looking at the world through the eyes of this habituation. And we are looking at the world through the eyes of a very self-centered approach. So that causes us to, the moment that somebody says something that we don't like, immediately we react with maybe some cases anger, some cases feeling attacked or feeling inferior or feeling some sort of disturbing feeling. So this is where our habituated thinking has actually interfered in an experience. So we can say that there is just this experience. Somebody has said blah blah blah. So the reality is that somebody has said blah blah blah, but I, through my habituation and the whole collection of my self-image and my sort of leanings, the leaning of my personality, the preponderances or the propensities of my personality, which I've accumulated over a long period of time, and so I react in a certain way, and I reach into my toolkit of handy emotions, and I pick out my favourites, which are going to be anger and resentment and sort of maybe cowardice, maybe jealousy, maybe pride, maybe arrogance. So we pick up what is familiar to us. So how do we even see that in our own? One of the things is, it's fine talking about Buddhism. The Buddha said this, the Buddha said that, but I think until we see that within us, within me, there is a tendency to some good emotions, but there is also a tendency to some destructive emotions. Anger, jealousy, pride, arrogance, miserliness. And, to come to a point where you can actually identify them within yourself, that can be useful. So now, the Buddha recommended, this whole issue we can deal with this whole issue by relying on loving kindness and compassion to others. So maybe we can actually not have to particularly dig into ourselves, that we can just say the solution is there. Developing loving kindness and compassion to others. You know, the Buddha has said that's the solution. So let me try that solution and see what happens. So instead of necessarily raking over the coals of our whole life and you know, whatever other habituations that we were born with, instead of going through those in great detail, we can just say the path that I am going to take is the development of loving kindness and compassion. And I'm going to see how that goes. You know, so I think we can do that. We don't necessarily have to, at the moment, I don't think we have to particularly dig into every aspect of our personality and sort of say, oh, that's not so good. That's not. I think we can actually train ourselves in developing loving kindness and compassion. And all of this other stuff will actually disappear. So I think that's possible. So, you know, the question is, how do we actually do that? And so one of the things we were talking a little bit about last week, are human beings, you know, if we're putting them on a scale, are we naturally altruistic? You know, is our level of kindness and altruism and compassion, let's say, is it more than half, or is the anger and arrogance and pride and that, is that stronger? So I think one of the things to console ourselves is that we can say the human life, so the main cause for human life is morality, which basically means non-harming, not to harm others. So in the bigger picture of taking a rebirth, taking a life, that the primary cause for being a human is ethical behaviour, which essentially means not harming others. And then our life as a human, in addition to that, our life as a human is also primarily caused by generosity. And so as a result of that generosity, we live in a beautiful country, a beautiful city. We can come to a nice building, a nice place with good conditions. All of this is the result of our previous generosity. And our previous patience. So the third main cause of a human life is patience. So from that patience, which is a big part of patience is non-retaliation, not getting angry, tolerating difficult circumstances with contentment. So because of that, you can sit next to somebody who has no harm in their mind towards you. So this is something really to think about, that in this society, that you can walk down the street and you don't even have the thought that all these other people have any wish to harm you. You know, there's no thought in general, there is no thought that I am going to be harmed. And that's actually a very special and precious quality. And I think we can say that quality does exist in this country. But if we check, we can see that it doesn't necessarily exist everywhere, even in these modern days or in all the different countries. So this again is the beneficial result from people practicing patience. So we have those conditions. So we have these really good conditions. So it's actually put forward as an antidote to, if you're starting to feel a little bit depressed, is to think about just how good this human life is, how good these conditions are, and how fortunate I am to have this human life. So we go through this process of recognizing that, and I think it's worth trying to really convince yourself that my whole life I have lived and I've made decisions, I have done this, I've done that, I've worked here, worked there, had this relationship, that relationship, everything stemming from the wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. The creation of a relationship, the ending of a relationship, what I order from a menu, where I go, where I work, when I go to sleep, when I wake up, everything is geared around this wish, the wish for happiness and the wish to be free from suffering. So I think it's worth questioning whether that's true for yourself, but certainly I feel that my life, I have lived my life doing that, whether consciously or unconsciously, but the decisions that I have made have been from the basis of my perception of reality. And unfortunately, that perception of reality has been a little bit contaminated by my habituations. So my habituations have caused me to make poor decisions, caused me to maybe harm other people or to cause problems for other people, but still my wish was to be happy and to be free from suffering. So to understand that situation, that due to the skills that I possess, even though I want to be happy and I want to be free from suffering, as Shantideva says, although I want to be happy, I have avoided the causes of happiness as though they're poison. And although I want to be free from suffering, I have embraced the causes of suffering as though they're my best friend. Through some form of ignorance, I've actually created the causes for suffering and I have banished the causes for happiness. So when the Buddha sort of says, well, this is all true, so how about you have a crack at developing loving kindness and compassion for others, because this works. So that's the way the Buddha is sort of presenting it, that you've tried all this other stuff, but here is something that will work for you, and that is to develop loving kindness and compassion for others. So, the problem that we have is that an affliction is something, an afflicted mind or an afflictive emotion, there's various terms, delusions and afflictive emotions, afflictive minds, is something which by its own nature is itself disturbing to me. So when we experience anger, if we look at the anger, if we actually look at the experience of the anger itself, you can clearly see that it is disturbing. Your body is affected, your judgment is affected, maybe even your digestion, your ability to sleep, your blood pressure, your health, everything is affected. It is by its very nature quite disturbing. And jealousy also, that when our mind is jealous, the actual state of mind that we possess at that moment is disturbed. There is some disturbance. Similarly, miserliness, the mind of miserliness, not wanting to give people stuff or thinking that they owe you or some sort of thought like that, even for yourself, not spending money on yourself, not wanting to buy this or buy that, or to have good food, you want cheap food or whatever it is, the miserly mind itself is disturbing. So some of these become harder and harder to see, and particularly when we get to attachment, it's more difficult to see attachment is as disturbing. But I think if you spend some time actually looking at the lustful mind, or at the attached mind, the desirous mind, and really sort of get a feel for the very base of that experience, you'll see that it is disturbing. And obviously the very lustful person has no interest in anything other than their object of desire, and so their wish for food, or their wish for sleep, or their wish for anything else is subdued because of the extensiveness of their lust and desire. So if we investigate, we can see that it actually is a disturbance. So that's a slightly separate point to what we're mainly talking about. So we can do some meditation. We'll just start off with some breathing meditation. And the important thing is to have a motive. So meditation, let's say breathing meditation itself, is effectively a neutral activity. Focusing on the breath is itself neither positive nor negative. The breath itself is neither positive nor negative. It's colourless, formless, odourless. It's quite an inert object to some degree. And focusing on it just by itself is essentially also neither positive nor negative. So we can make it a positive action by motivating ourselves in a way that is positive. And so we're going to later be doing the sort of a loving kindness meditation. So we can motivate in this way. We can motivate, I'm going to engage in the breathing meditation to settle my mind, to prepare my mind for generating loving kindness, to free my mind from any afflictive thoughts, to free my mind from any disturbances, and to try to overcome my habituations to negativity that I might have. So for these reasons, I am going to engage in this breathing meditation, and I will put in the effort to 100% keep my mind focused on the breath. So for the next few minutes, I will put effort into doing that for this motivation. So it's always good to motivate. So adopt a good posture. Mainly some sort of symmetry in your body, balanced fore and aft, side to side, and your back fairly straight so that it helps the mental energy sort of move through your body. And first of all, become aware of your thinking, aware of any thoughts or distractions in your mind. And as you sort of see them, let them just drop away. So don't follow that distraction, but just let it drop away. And keep doing this. let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of anything outside of here. Keep letting go of all these thoughts. Bringing your mind into a state of no thought. So, no thought. Just try to hold your mind in that state. Clear and open, but no thought. And then turn your attention onto the breath. Just the awareness of the breath, and hold that as your object 100%. Just relax your concentration a little bit and check what happened in your meditation, and recognize honestly how you went with your focus. If you were daydreaming or sleeping. So just acknowledge that did happen. Just reflect on what actually happened in your meditation. So now we'll just repeat the same meditation, and we enter the meditation with a strong determination to keep the breath 100% on, keep the mind's focus 100% on the breath. So we just repeat the same sequence So relax your concentration a little bit. So now I want you to think about somebody that's very close to you. So somebody that you feel strong affection for, that you already have a sense of care and concern for this person. And so we imagine that person in front of me. Each one of us recollects a person that you're close to, that you're very fond of, affectionate towards, that you care for. So sit them in front of you in your meditation now. Imagine them facing you, but just a couple of meters away. And so just look at them, and you recollect your affection for them. So initially you just place them in front of you and generate that warm-hearted affection for them. And then thinking, this person just wants happiness, just wants to be free of suffering, just wants happiness, just wants to be free of suffering. So mentally looking at them and thinking, they want happiness. They want to be free from suffering. This is something that they deeply want. They deeply want happiness, and they deeply want to be free from suffering. This is an instinctive wish from being human. They want happiness, and they want to be free from suffering. And so then, recollecting what you know about the person, start to see that they want happiness, but they don't actually have full happiness. They don't have the happiness that they want. And they don't want suffering, but they actually have suffering. They have suffering in their bodies, and they have suffering in their mind. But they don't want this suffering. They don't want the suffering in their body. They don't want the suffering in their mind. So clearly looking at the person, thinking about their life, and really thinking they want happiness and they want to be free from suffering. But they actually lack happiness, and they actually have suffering. So on the basis of your affection for them, your care and concern for this person, generate a really strong wish that this person has happiness and that this person becomes free of suffering. So generate a really strong wish that this person has happiness and becomes free of suffering. And you can think about all the different types of suffering that they face. And you can think about all the different types of happinesses that they lack. And have this sense of really strong wish that they have happiness and they become free from suffering. And as you're thinking this and contemplating this person's circumstances, see if you can generate a thought. This is my responsibility. This is my responsibility to bring this about. So see if you can generate a sense of responsibility to bring this situation to fruit. To bring it to reality that they have happiness and that they are free from suffering. So we can just relax the meditation there. So I added in this aspect of a sense of responsibility, like whether we can generate a sense of responsibility towards bringing about somebody's happiness and bringing about their freedom from suffering. So we've got time now for some discussion or questions, whatever you'd like. So if anybody has anything they'd like to reflect on the meditation or share, that'd be great. Yeah.
I've always thought of the breath as being positive. I'm interested by your notion that it's not positive or negative.
Yeah. No, the breath itself. So the question is about whether the breath itself is positive. No, it's viewed as a neutral object. The breath itself. It's neutral. Well, what positive quality does it possess in itself? It would be if you're asserting that it's positive. You can view the breath as life-giving, but in terms of meditation, though, it's life-giving whether you meditate or not.
So within a specific context,
So imagine that you're a sandwich. A sandwich is also life-giving. But would you particularly describe it as positive? Anyway, look, traditionally they say the breath itself it's got no colour, it's got no form in a way, you could say no form. In terms of our sensory experience, you can't particularly say that it's attractive per se, but and look, there's a really very nice meditation actually done by Thich Nhat Hanh, where he talks about the breath, is something that we share with every living being, and it is life-giving, and so you can contemplate that aspect of commonality with every living being in sharing the air and it being life-giving. But in this context, I think in itself it is neutral, and so focusing on the breath in itself, And that's why I mentioned last week, what they call box breathing, which is this thing that's come from the US Marines, the 6-step box breathing, which is a lot of mindfulness people talk about it, developed to help snipers calm themselves to shoot. Now, is that a positive thing? Yeah, that was last week. We talked about that last week. And I use that as an example to say that meditating on the breath per se is not necessarily positive. An example being box breathing used by the soldiers to calm themselves before shooting somebody. There's no positivity in that. So for that reason, the breath itself is neither positive nor negative, but by our motivation, we make the breathing meditation positive. And there's another argument that goes that we enter the breathing meditation specifically with the intention to suspend our afflictions. So if we're going to meditate on the breath for 5 minutes, we are suspending our afflictions for 5 minutes. And that is a positive. That is a positive thing. If we can actually suspend our anger, jealousy, attachment, desire for 5 minutes, that is a positive. So for that reason, it is also positive. If that is our intention when we meditate. So, and I would say again, the soldier meditating on the breath is not particularly suspending his wish to kill. He's actually, the meditation is enhancing his wish to kill. So it's, in that sense, it's not positive. But for us, if we become aware of this, this toolkit of habituations, negative habituations, our anger, jealousy and things, you might find, when you actually look, you can start to see that to some degree, if you're an angry person, that anger pervades most of your actions. If you're a desirous person, it pervades most of your actions. If you're miserly, all these different things pervade your actions quite extensively. And so when we meditate, and we meditate with the belief, I am focusing on the breath, and because I'm focusing on the breath 100%, I'm actually suspending my afflictions. That's a real positive. So, yeah. So, what did you think about the idea of taking responsibility for somebody else's situation?
It's cool. It starts to take things from like a realm of this vague possibility into things that actually kind of created this sense of momentum to avoid things.
And a purpose? Do you think like also a purpose or? So I mention it because in this tradition, one of the qualities we are trying to generate is this concept of bodhicitta, Buddha mind. The altruistic intention for enlightenment. And so in the meditations to develop that bodhicitta, there's two main systems of meditation. But we go through those steps and we come to a point where we totally recognize the suffering of others and we totally recognize the lack of happiness of others. We see that in all of its complexity. And we see that that person needs to do this, and this to overcome their suffering. And they need to do this, and this to develop their happiness and develop their good qualities. But you come to a point where you realise that this is not going to happen by itself. This will only happen if I enable this to happen, if I take the responsibility for this person to make it happen. And so in those meditations on developing bodhicitta, that point is called superior intention. And it's basically the point where you accept the responsibility for all living beings that I alone, so the type of mind that's required is that I alone will do this, so that the development of a sense of responsibility to such a great extent that you perceive the suffering of all living beings and come to a point where you accept the responsibility to do something about it. So you can see that that's a very, very special state of mind. But we can start with one person that we feel really close to, that we have sort of a strong affection for, and think, I will accept the responsibility to help this person be happy and be free from suffering. I will take that responsibility. So we can work on that idea of actually embracing the responsibility for somebody else's happiness and their freedom from suffering. And then we can start to think, how can I actually do that? Is it even possible for me to do that? So that's another question in a way. But generating this sense of responsibility from a Buddhist point of view is a very important step on the whole path of personal development. Because it makes you then ask the question, can I actually help them? How can I help them? Do I have any of the skills needed to help this person? Even though I really care and have deep concern for them. I really care, I really have deep concern for them, but can I help them? So these are very important questions, to sort of contemplate in the Buddhist context. So the question is, where do you draw the line? So what line are you drawing? So what line are you drawing? Yeah, and so obviously skillful means is critical. Absolutely. And certainly also from a Buddhist point of view, and this is what the Buddha, you have to, what I'm talking about here is actually what the Buddha did. He took the responsibility. And so we are all evidence that there are still a great many people who are not yet taking that advice that the Buddha gave. Because if we'd taken the advice, we would not still be stuck in this sort of circumstance, So that's one aspect to think about. And so obviously the thing is, if somebody's not ready, not willing and not able to take the advice, the Buddha has infinite patience to be there when you are ready to accept the advice. But the reality is most of us are not willing to accept the advice or the instruction of the Buddha. That's the reality. So, but the Buddha is there for when we are ready. Sorry? Sometimes we have to help to give to ways to give help. Yeah, and exactly. Even in the normal worldly consideration, the medical fraternity, the aid-giving fraternity, the social workers, everybody, they all have to have patience to wait until the person is ready to be helped. You know, that's common with everything, you know. The person in the shop, you know, the shop attendant, they stand and wait until you're ready for help. You know, if they come up to you and you're not ready for help, you get really annoyed. You know, leave me alone, I'm just browsing, you know. So the same applies even in the worldly circumstance. The skillful action is to you know, choose the perfect moment to help the person. You know, whether it's selling you a pair of socks or helping you to achieve enlightenment.
What do we say about those people who have take it upon themselves in I guess unhealthy way to please everybody else? It comes to be authority on their instead.
So the question is about people who you know, try to please everybody, and then their own internal state becomes burdened by that. That's what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah. So I think this is where some analysis, and you know, the thing is to apply this to yourself. So the wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. And like I said, we have this collection of habituations. So if one of the habituations that I have is cultivating cultivating a persona where everybody loves me, you know. And so you put a lot of effort into just pleasing and manipulating other people so that they never think bad of you. And you know, so your agenda is this, what you think is important, which is this sort of having praise and having some good reputation. So there's a thing called the 8 worldly dharmas, which is the eight worldly phenomena, we can say, if we translate the word dharma in that case. So the eight worldly phenomena. And one of them is that I have the belief that happiness comes from people liking me and praising me. You know, from hearing good words, hearing praise. So I have a belief that my true happiness will come from people thinking very highly of me and praising me, and that I have a sense of fame and good reputation. So from a Buddhist point of view, that is a deception of what is really the cause of your happiness. And so if you adhere to these 8 worldly phenomena, that it's actually deceiving you, because you're pandering basically to your own sense of pride, and that becomes deceptive of being an actual real cause of happiness. So and it can be very hard to identify within yourself if that has gone too far. And so that contemplation, the 8 worldly dharmas, or the 8 worldly behaviours that we all engage in, are asserted in Buddhism to be deceptive or deceiving. You know, we think these things are a cause of happiness and a cause for overcoming suffering, but they are actually deceptive, and they do not result in happiness or in overcoming our suffering. And one of them is this being attached to hearing praise and pleasant words and good reputation. You know, being attached to it and thinking that this is a real cause of happiness. You know, so it's not that there's anything wrong with being praised or with having a good reputation, but if you are attached to it as a source of happiness, it deceives you. So I think your question, that example you're talking about, could fall into that category, that it can be in a bigger picture an unrewarding belief.
Would a distinction be if the activity is directed toward somebody else's happiness and it's
Well, that enters another problematic area, which is the contractual behaviour, that I'm going to be really nice to you so that you'll be really nice to me, or that you will give me things, or you will praise me, or you will think I'm a good person. So if your motivation for benefiting somebody else is about receiving praise or receiving a good reputation or being prominent and hailed as a good person, that you've actually destroyed the actual benefit, the action of benefit, because it's become contaminated by your own self-interest and, again, your wish for praise and reputation and high status, rather than actually wishing to benefit the person. So the more that we can do an action, whether it's giving a cup of tea, we have become so contaminated in our motives in actions that we might give somebody a cup of tea, and we're giving a cup of tea thinking, I'm such a good tea giver. I'm such a, look at me, I'm serving you a cup of tea. Aren't I fantastic? So you can see that even the simplest action can become contaminated by our self-centered sort of interest. And so, but the only solution to that is for you to understand your actual motive in doing anything. To really understand your motive. And so the things that you need to be able to do that are these qualities of mindfulness and introspection. So these are two qualities that come in your mind through meditation. So by doing breathing meditation, these qualities of mindfulness and introspection become developed. And particularly the quality of introspection is the ability for you to read what your mind is doing, to actually see what your mind is doing. So that, for instance, if you are giving a cup of tea, you can see whether it's actually out of pride and grasping at reputation. You can see that within yourself, or you can see whether it's merely the generosity of giving a cup of tea for the benefit of the other person. You'll be able to see that. But nearly all of the time with our actions, all these things are hidden from us because we do not have the perception to actually see our own motive. And so that's something that comes with meditation, is to be able to see your own motive. And so what you can then do is, if you detect, I'm doing this out of a sense of my looking for a good reputation, you can stop thinking that way, and instead you can think, no, I've got to focus on this just with the sense of generosity, of giving. But so you can check and change your behaviour in that moment by having this quality of introspection, so that you detect that you're doing something out of anger or pride or arrogance or jealousy or search for high reputation, higher status. And you can see it, check it, oppose it, and replace it with a simpler motivation of just giving for the benefit of the other person. So that's the essence of thought transformation, is really understanding on the momentary situation what is happening in my mind. How do I replace that destructive thought with something more positive? Something that is out of generosity or kindness. So that's the process. But it takes that momentary awareness of what you're actually doing. And for all of us, that is hidden all of the time. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for the questions. Really good questions, and good for the discussion. So let's just imagine we do it. You know, you have to recognise that coming together and meditating together is something very rare, very, very precious. You know, to talk about these topics is extremely rare. And so we think that this is, you would call it, this is like good merit or good virtue, and think that it takes the form of white light in the centre of the room, everybody together, and bring it above your own head and let it dissolve into your body. Completely fill your body and your mind so that your body and your mind become completely clear, expansive, your mind very clear and open. You know, with a sense of joy. And then imagine the person that you visualised before in the meditation, imagine them in front of you and feel that you give them the benefit of this meditation. And to every living being, imagine the light radiates at and benefits every living being. So thank you very much. And there is some cake tonight. So Lynn has baked the cake. And she told me there was, when she was baking it, that it smelt so fantastic she wanted to eat it straight away. And Kerry and Diana are here from the executive committee if any of you'd like to have a chat, and good opportunity. So, but otherwise, I'll see you next week. So thank you very much.